Hello everyone. So welcome to the second week of the class. I hope you have by now starting to slowly get into the rhythm of the intensive class. So what you had last week is the typical workload for a week during the 6-week intensive classes. And as usual, I want to remind you to write me if you have any questions or difficulties in doing these classes. And apart from that, I hope you have really enjoyed our exchange so far and really learned something from this class. So remember in the first lecture, we talked about how development is often associated with income, technology, and infrastructure. And then also in the lecture before this, lecture 3, we talk about modernizations and dependency theory. And if you remember in my very last slides, I actually asked you what are the similarities between these two theories and how do they understand development. So I think one very important similarity of them is that both theories define development as economic and income growth brought by industrialization. So back again to our very familiar slides here. What we are discussing today are the major debates happening in the 1970s and 1980s, where people really start to talk about grow with equity and also participatory and inclusive development. Gross national income and gross domestic products are perceived to be very important indicators pursued by different governments, at least up to the 1970s or even up to now. So our governments also have the annual projections of or report of economic growth, right? And if it reaches certain percentage, we all believe that our countries have done well. Once again, I want to remind you not to take for granted that with all these human societies living in totally different ecological, historical, and social contexts, having one standard for common pursuit by all governments is really something quite remarkable. And I would say that this is a very successful propagation of the idea of development and modernizations. And in the current situation of COVID-19, countries around the world are really pressured to open up for economic activities. And there are real anxieties surrounding the issue of economy everywhere. But then I would say that this is also an opportunity to think about sustainability. How sustainable are our current systems and what can the COVID-19 actually tell us? So can we really go back to the normal after COVID-19? Do we want to? So I also encourage you to do a little bit of reflection during this time, like how our systems can be more sustainable. Okay, going back to our slide, the World Bank actually religiously collect gross national income data of all countries everywhere up until very recently. So I want to show you this website. So you can see that the World Bank is collecting the data of GNI per capita, not total GNI, just to remind you. If you scroll down, you can see that there's a graph showing the world GNI that has been growing since 1990 to 2018. And then if we scroll down, we can see all the different countries with the highest GNI. We see Qatar, we see Macau, Singapore, Brunei, UAE, Luxembourg. So again, I remind you, this is per capita. And United States really come after some positions. Maybe it's number 10 or something. Okay, so if you scroll down further to the very bottom, you can see that the World Bank has classified what is considered high income, what is considered middle income, what is considered low income, as usual. Yeah, so this is the overview of the GNI data by the World Bank, which is a major development actors. So the major underlying belief of these obsessions to economic growth and the deep association between income and development is that this wealth or this income will eventually trickle down from the hands of people who earn it to those who are poor. So you can see these two diagrams, which is the diagram representations of the trickle-down effect. So if you look at the right-hand side, basically the idea is that the rich people are at the top of pyramids of glasses or cups, and if you pour wine into the top glass, and it will overflow eventually and benefits all the glasses at the bottom, which symbolize the poor. So if you look at the left-hand side diagram, there are more concrete explanation of how the trickle-down effect is expected to occur. So if you look at there, that it says rich gain more wealth, and then followed by investment creating jobs. So when the rich is richer, they will invest in industry and create more jobs, and then they will also spend more money, higher spending here, that increases demand for more products. So these different activities will actually lead to better employment and better pay for low-skilled workers, and increased tax revenue, which can be redistributed. And then it will also produce a multiplier effect of increased spending. So this is the assumptions and the underlying belief of what is called trickle-down effect. And basically, most countries, when they pursue economic growth as the means to development, they assume that any kind of growth, any kind of income gain would be trickled down. So how will this wealth be trickled down? Most of them assume that this will happen automatically. Just by having the richest having more money, they will spread the wealth around. But also, some believe that it can happen through taxation and redistributions and welfare policies. So if you tax the rich people, then you can improve services for the poor. Okay, so I have found online several funny graphics that mocks trickle-down economics. There are really a lot of them. I had a fun time looking at all of them and picking up those that I like the most to show you here. So you can see that the trickle-down economics has been well criticized, and people are aware that this is not true. And so, for example, this particular figure shows that the water or the wine didn't really overflow to glasses at the bottom. It actually flows to the Panama account. So for those of you who don't know, several years back, there was this famous Panama Papers scandal, which showed that there are more than 200,000 offshore companies by business entities around the world. So these offshore companies are illegal. They were established to conduct fraud or to evade taxes, or to just simply escape from any kind of international sanctions or international law. So there have been a lot of money operating illegally in these offshore entities. So this is a mockery of that. And then also this one, I also really like this one, where the birds at the bottom are really having the most shit. And then this one, this is actually what I share on Facebook during Easter because I really like it, and I remember it, so I copy and put it here to share with you. That is it wrong that I'm 14 and believe in the Easter Bunny, while son I'm 38 and still believe in trickle-down economics. Okay, so the problem here is after decades of economic growth, as you have seen on the World Bank website, why millions are still living in poverty, right? That's the questions, right? So if the gross national income keep increasing and national income actually equals to development, so why are we still facing the problem of poverty? So in other words, why trickle-down economics don't work, right? So after these sections of the lecture, I will direct you to a TED Talk by Nick Hanauer, who actually explained that why the rich people might not be behaving the way that we expect them to behave, for example, spending more money and employing more people. So you can watch it after this section. But for now, I want to go to Arndt's article, which I listed as the class reading. So Arndt is a development economist, and he was really trying to defend the post-1945 or post-World War II development economies by saying that they have never actually suggested that trickle-down economics will work. They have always known that it doesn't work this way. In fact, they all acknowledge that economic activities are inegalitarian processes, and inequality is not surprising when you are only focusing on economic growth and economic activities. In other words, they actually believe that inequality is inherent in economic activities. Well, one of the reasons given is that it is not that the wealth is not flowing vertically from the rich people to the poor people. It's more like it doesn't flow horizontally, like when one sector gains wealth, it is not being spread easily to other sectors. And in countries where there are very isolated geographies and remote places, this is especially so. And it also says that the development economists actually understand that inequality only improves in the developed societies after long and arduous political processes. So in places where there are more equalities, it's actually through a struggle and long processes of political evolution or political revolution that makes equality into the agenda. So it doesn't occur naturally. Equality is something that government have to do or people have to fight for. And then it says that because development economies were focusing so much on the inequality between countries, they actually neglected to talk about internal income distribution within those countries. So this is to show you that in the 1970s, it is already quite widely accepted that trickle-down economics is a myth. So according to J.B. Grant, who was with the Overseas Development Council, I quoted here, it has now become clear that the definition of development as economic growth alone is grossly inadequate. In fact, the trickle-down theory of development, whereby the poor supposedly benefit from overall economic growth or policies benefiting the rich, is proving utterly inadequate. So what does all this mean for international development? Well, I guess the obvious answer is we should not just target economic growth. Target economic growth doesn't mean alleviating poverty, doesn't mean development. Instead, let's aim more for social objectives like employment, education. Following the debunking of trickle-down economics, we have the basic needs approach, which I will talk about in the next section of this lecture. But also, there's an increasing attention to improve the distribution of economic benefits. If you remember in the very first slides, we talk about how dependency theory is followed by a propagation for growth with equity, right? So there is a trend or a paradigm emerging to address inequality. And there are various indicators like the Gini coefficient, which actually measure income inequality. So the Gini coefficients, if you have a number closer to 0, that means that the society is more equal. And then you have also gender inequality index that was developed after in the more recent time. And also there were inequality adjusted HDI. HDI is the Human Development Index, which I talked about from the very first lecture. Okay, so for now, I will go to look at the websites on HDI and to show you that how there is a difference between HDI and inequality adjusted HDI. So you can see that the highest HDI holder currently in 2017 is Norway, here, Norway. And then after inequality adjustment, it actually -1 in rank. So most of the countries actually have minus ranking, but Iceland has a positive ranking after inequality adjustments. And who is this -14? Hong Kong, China. Okay, so China, Hong Kong at least has very quite a significant inequality issue. And then Singapore as well, -10. Okay, so here we go. We have United States here, which is -11 after inequality adjustment. So I want to end this session with a question. Do you think many people still believe in trickle-down economics today, and why? So take some moment to think about this, jot down your answers. It can be part of a reflections, or bring your comments to the Tuesday synchronous sections. And after this, please watch the TED Talk that I have provided the link for in Canvas before going to the next sections of the lecture. Thank you very much.